Let me walk you through a little bit of the history, a quick summary of the history of Black Bottom.
Black Bottom is acre for acre the most historically significant area in Michigan's history.
Black Bottom was known as Black Bottom not because it was associated with black people originally. It was known as Black Bottom by the French.
Black Bottom was originally named that because of the creeks and rivers that run all through the Lower East Side that deposit this rich black soil all over the Lower East Side. That rich black soil, the French called fond noir, which is Black Bottom.
Black Bottom was the place where people came after they arrived from the South, particularly after the early part of the 20th century, when Henry Ford began to make his call for the $5 day in his factories, and industry began to arise. Well, black people were escaping the semi-servitude of the plantation, and so they came here. However, they were restricted and spatially limited.
Black Bottom is in the Lower East Side of the city of Detroit. African Americans are living there from the time period of the 1700s, when many of them are enslaved by the French and British early residents of the city of Detroit, the wealthy British and French. And later, by the time we get to the late 1700s, 1800s, you have people organizing against slavery, and many of these people who are organizing are African Americans. And these African Americans are founding what is going to be a major part of the Underground Railroad in the city of Detroit. As you have African Americans leading this abolitionist movement in the city of Detroit, at that time period, you also have them building businesses, starting schools, starting other institutions. And as they're doing that, as they're starting those institutions, as they're building those things, they're creating a whole new history in the Lower East Side of the city of Detroit.
I am working on Black Bottom Street View because I think that it's really important to preserve the histories of that neighborhood so that future generations can understand its significance and can understand how we came to get in the place that we are today as a city. We really started working on this project when I realized that the Burton Historical Collection has about 2,000 photographs of houses in Black Bottom in their archive. So the library has been working with us to deal with the photos, the scanning of the photos, and they've also been very generously hosted the exhibit up in Strohm Hall. So it'll be up in Strohm Hall for about 3 months. So many important historic figures came out of that neighborhood. It began as an immigrant neighborhood. Whatever the ethnic group was that was moving to the city at the time would often first land in Black Bottom.
We were surrounded by other nationalities, you know. So you had the Greeks down by Greektown or whatever. So our little area was just in that little boundary that I said, from Hastings to McDougal, from this side of Jefferson to up to Verner, and extended over, you know, but that area was kind of sort of Black Bottom.
How many of you white people who are here because your roots are in Black Bottom? There are some people here whose parents, whose grandparents really grew up in this area and have no conception really of where it was. That's right. How many black people had no idea really what Black Bottom really was? Because it is an area that was destroyed and whose collective memory, the memories of this, were constructed in such a way as to have Black Bottom regarded as a slum, as a den of prostitution, as a place that was in abject shambles. This is a part of the justification for the destruction of Black Bottom. So that in our collective memory, it was a place that did not deserve to exist. So Black Bottom is actually the seat. It is the font of the humanity of Detroit, of the Russian Jews, of the Lebanese, of the Greeks, of the Italians, of the Germans, of the people from Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. These people came together in a mosaic of this city. Anyone who grew up in Black Bottom will tell you many of them could speak a little bit of all of these languages because of the assimilation of people in Black Bottom.
You know Black Bottom as a black historic neighborhood, but prior to the 1930s, this is an integrated neighborhood of immigrants along with African Americans. The evidence that they were there is still there. We just have kind of forgotten. So I'm gonna take you through a quick walkthrough. When you're in Greektown is part of Black Bottom, all right? When you're in Greektown, on one end of Monroe Block is Second Baptist, the oldest black church in the state of Michigan. It precedes everything else in Greektown. On the other end of the block is St. Mary's, German Catholic Church. You got a German church on one end of the block and an African American church on the other end of the block in Greektown, all right? Around the corner is Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church, and it's founded in 1910 when the Greek immigrants are coming in. If you walk down Hastings Street, that's now the 75 Service Drive, but if you walk down Hastings Street, you will find Church of Our Family, Church of Our Holy Family, the Italian Catholic Church.
And so it was, especially in its earlier days, it was really economically diverse. So there was a whole kind of solidarity economy that developed in that community, people supporting each other's businesses.
By the time we get to the late 20s and early 30s, many of those immigrant groups are now able to move out of Black Bottom because gradually those immigrants, those German immigrants, those Jewish immigrants, those Irish immigrants, those Italian and Greek immigrants, they gradually are accepted as white people in the city of Detroit and in America. And as they're accepted less as immigrants and more as white Americans, they have more privileges to move wherever they want to, or at least wherever their money will allow them to move to. African Americans, despite what their money situation is, despite the economic conditions, are facing housing discrimination and other forms of discrimination. And so the second, the third, and fourth generations of African Americans are concentrated in the Lower East Side area known as Black Bottom.
The photos were taken as a part of the eminent domain process when the city was getting ready to demolish Black Bottom.
In 1944, a gentleman named Eugene Greenhouse comes to Mayor Edward Jeffries Jr., Mayor of Detroit. He comes to Mayor Jeffries and offers a proposal to carry out what was called slum clearance. Slum clearance. Really what that meant, that was the precursor term for urban renewal. And of course, if you happen to look like me, we said that urban renewal means what?
Negro removal.
Negro removal.
And it became a really important neighborhood for the African American community because they weren't able to live in a lot of other neighborhoods in the city because of segregation and racism. So many neighborhoods in the city had restrictive covenants, racially restrictive covenants, where the white homeowners weren't allowed to sell to a black family. And the Jewish community really helped to loosen some of those racially restrictive covenants by sort of breaking those covenants and selling to African American people. But in the 1930s and 40s, there really weren't very many other places where you could live if you were African American.
How many remember George Edwards? He was police commissioner. He also was he was also a state Supreme Court justice. But in 1949, he was the city council president, the common council president. He's a left-winger. Jamon, you know that he was a UAW organizer, right? He had an affection with the black community. Kobo didn't. Kobo wins the election by what we call in political terms in a landslide. Kobo accelerates the destruction and the razing of Black Bottom. He gets elected, he takes office in 1950. The first thing he does is releases the Housing Commission director. The same Housing Commission director that said, okay, if we're going to eliminate a community that's 80% black, and we're going to eliminate that community, and we also know that there are pockets of the city that white folk don't want black folk to live in. Black folk couldn't live in Copper Canyon in northeast Detroit. They sure couldn't live in Rosedale Park. Black folk who were able to be teachers and postal workers who were able to get the financing to build a home. There were some black folk in Coney Gardens, right? Some black folk on 8 Mile in Wyoming, but the lion's share of African Americans lived in Black Bottom and or Paradise Valley. So, Cobo accelerates this plan. He eliminates, again, he takes away the housing commissioner who proposes 9 public housing sites on the outskirts of the city for not only whites who were looking for housing, but African Americans. Cobo says, nah, we're gonna change that plan. In fact, Mr. Housing Director, I'm gonna fire you and bring on a new housing director. Remember, Cobo's a supply sider. He goes and gets the president, Jamon, of the Building Association. The building guy who builds homes, the right winger, doesn't care anything about, Truman says we're gonna spend billions of dollars on black communities or billions of dollars in urban communities and do public housing. Cobo says, I'm not gonna take that federal money. I'm gonna raise Black Bottom. The photos that Emily found that you are seeing today are the photos that the city took, surveyors took, as they were planning to raise the community. These weren't goodwill photos. These were photos where they were looking at lines of demarcation, right? I'm not an architect, Emily, but the point is, these photos were part of the process of eliminating Black Bottoms, right?
I had no plans to do a project about Black Bottom when I started working on it. I was just trying to find pictures of Hastings Street. I wanted to see what Hastings Street looks like because I had heard about it. It's a legendary street in Detroit, and it's hard to find pictures online. So I was looking in some of the different archives and trying to see what I could find. And when I typed in Hastings Street into the Burton Historical Collection's digital database, it pulled up thousands of pictures of houses. And so when I realized what it was, that they were actually photographs of every house in Black Bottom, I downloaded all of the pictures and I just kind of wanted to see if they were continuous and if we could make a picture of the whole street. And once I really started looking at the photographs and realized how beautiful they are and how striking it is to be able to see the whole neighborhood, I just kind of tried to do it all.
What is important about this? This gathering right here is unprecedented. There has been no similar gathering like this. All of you should be very proud of being here. Because what we are really doing here is that we are really figuring out not the past of Detroit, but its future. We are really looking for the means by which here in this, quote, new Detroit, we might live together. I would like to see a Detroit where the African American community is respected as being a very important part of the late history of this city and kept this city going after it was abandoned by industry. And I would like to see the return of people to Detroit be made up of significant numbers of people who have determined that they want to live in Detroit with Detroiters as equals.
Working on this project has really been an amazing experience for me. It's really been a growing experience for me, and I think that one of the most amazing things that has come out of this project for me has been just developing relationships with different individuals who have a connection to the history of Black Bottom.